Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another session in our series on coming home and finding forgiveness. Today, we're talking about the inevitable obstacle in the road. What journey is complete without a few obstacles along the way, right? So, for those of you following along at home, we will be in the book of Exodus, chapter 14, verses 5 through 31. Before we get to the reading, though, we do, as always, have our optional icebreaker questions. So, our first question is, as a kid, who was your favorite superhero and what special power did they have? For me, it was Superman. So, between ice breath, laser beams that you can shoot out of your eyes, X-ray vision, flight, super strength. Super speed. Can't forget super speed either. I think Superman was the one that I kind of focused around the most. Yeah. But what about you all? Did you all have a favorite superhero when you were kids? Let me know in the comments below. Our second icebreaker question is, if you had to get out of your house in 30 seconds, what one thing would you grab? Well, generally speaking, I have my medical ID bracelet and my wallet on me at all times. Generally, I have car keys in my pocket and I have phone on me, so those things I wouldn't even have to grab. I'm assuming this is kind of under the pretense of your house is on fire, it's about to burn to the ground. You have one thing that you can save. For me, that one thing would be a 1 gig flash drive that sits by my wife's and my computer. That flash drive has all of my poetry, all of my novels and short stories, basically all of my creative writing on it. And losing all of that would be a huge setback in creative writing career. So I think that's the one thing I would go towards grabbing. What about you all? If you had to get out of your house in 30 seconds, what one thing would you grab? Let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, we will move on to our reading for today. Again, we're in the book of Exodus, chapter 14, verses 5 through 31. Listen now for the word of our Lord. When the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, Pharaoh and his officials changed their minds about them and said, "What have we done? We have let the Israelites go and have lost our services." So he had his chariot made ready and took his army with him. He took 600 of his best chariots, along with all the other chariots of Egypt, with officers over all of them. The Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, so that he pursued the Israelites, who were marching out boldly. The Egyptians, all Pharaoh's horses and chariots, horsemen and troops, pursued the Israelites and overtook them as they camped by the sea near Pi Hahiroth, opposite Baal-Zephon. As Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians, marching after them. They were terrified and cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, "Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, 'Leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians'? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert." Moses answered the people, "Do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only be still." Then the Lord said to Moses, "Why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to move on. Raise your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea to divide the waters so that the Israelites can go through the sea on dry land. I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians so that they will go in after them. And I will gain glory through Pharaoh and all his army. Through his chariots and his horsemen, the Egyptians will know I am the Lord when I gain glory through Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen." Then the angel of God, who had been traveling in front of Israel's army, withdrew and went behind them. The pillar of cloud also moved from in front and stood behind them, coming between the armies of Egypt and Israel. Throughout the night the cloud brought darkness to the one side and light to the other, so neither were near the other all night long. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and all that night the Lord drove the sea back with a strong east wind and turned it into dry land. The waters were divided, and the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground, with a wall of water on their right and on their left. The Egyptians pursued them, and all Pharaoh's horses and chariots and horsemen followed them into the sea. During the last watch of the night, the Lord looked down from the pillar of fire and cloud at the Egyptian army and threw it into confusion. He made the wheels of their chariots come off, so that they had difficulty driving. And the Egyptians said, "Let's get away from the Israelites. The Lord is fighting for them against Egypt." Then the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea so that the waters may flow back over the Egyptians and their chariots and horsemen." Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and at daybreak the sea went back to its place. The Egyptians were fleeing toward it, and the Lord swept them into the sea. The water flowed back and covered the chariots and horsemen, the entire army of Pharaoh that had followed the Israelites into the sea. Not one of them survived. But the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground, with a wall of water on their right and on their left. That day the Lord saved Israel from the hands of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians lie dead on the shore. And when the Israelites saw the great power of the Lord displayed against the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord and put their trust in him and in Moses his servant. This is the word of our Lord. Thanks be to God. Our first question for today is, why do you suppose the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart? To show his power to the Egyptians, to punish Egypt, to show his power to Israel, or something else? The Israelites would, in my mind, wouldn't have been able to see that Egyptians' hearts had been hardened. And if the Egyptians' hearts were hardened, they probably would not have been paying attention to God. It probably would have been hardened to the works of God. So if anything, my thought is to punish Egypt. They were not followers of the God of Abraham, the God of Jacob. They were followers of this plethora of gods and goddesses, each with their own purpose, each with their own festival, at least to my understanding. So it could be punishment to Egypt. It could also be salvation for the Israelites. knowing that the Egyptians would have pursued the Israelites to the end of the earth, what better way to get rid of that obstacle, get rid of that opponent, than to wipe them all out? So he hardens their hearts. He makes it so that they see nothing but that single vision, that single objective of getting the Israelites back, even to a point where they follow Moses and the Israelites into the sea, ultimately to their own fall. So that could be punishment to the Israelites for not having faith in the God of Jacob, God of Abraham, not treating the Israelites with respect. It's a fair argument either way. You could also say for protection of the Israelites as well. But that's my response. Let me know in the comment section down below what you all think. Second question, why do you think the Lord chose this way of escape for the Israelites? To teach Pharaoh a lesson, to wipe out the Egyptians, to teach Israel to trust him, to teach Israel to trust Moses, or something else? Of those four, he doesn't actually wipe out the Egyptians. He wipes out a small segment of the Egyptians. There's still plenty of people back in Egypt, so he doesn't wipe out that whole civilization. In my mind, I would have to say to teach Israel to trust him and to trust Moses. The Israelites are complaining to Moses, who is a servant of God, about, why have you brought us out here to die? Because we didn't have graves already in Egypt? So through this there was an instilling of trust in both God and in Moses through this action. But also something that's not mentioned is the improbability that the Egyptians then would ever be able to find the Israelites, catch up with the Israelites, so on and so forth. You have this sea now in between the Egyptians and the Israelites. I mean, there's a possibility that they could go down and around, go up and around, something like that. But by the time they make that journey going up and around, Israelites have already continued their journey. They're, who knows what direction they may have gone after that, and there's also protection of the Israelites, I think, in that aspect then. Because there's a very slim, if any, chance that the Egyptians would even find the Israelites to take them back ever again. But that's my interpretation. Let me know in the comment section down below what you think. Why do you think the Lord chose this way of escape for the Israelites? Our third question, how do you feel about the Israelites' reaction to their situation? It was justified because they were afraid. They were acting like babies. Their faith was weak. They preferred the security of slavery over an uncertain future, or something else. I don't think their faith was weak. I don't think they blamed God for it. I think they blamed Moses explicitly for it. So I think that definitely everyone has their own level of preferring kind of the security of what is known as opposed to the insecurity of the unknown future. So definitely them preferring the security of slavery, knowing they would have a home, knowing that they would have some purpose in life, knowing that they wouldn't be the target of Pharaoh's wrath, that is a possibility. I think they were definitely acting childish. That's me, though. What about you all? How do you feel about the Israelites' reaction to their situation? Let me know in the comments below. Question 4. When you're caught between a rock and a hard place, how do you usually react? Question why God let this happen to me, beat myself up, look to blame someone, start doubting God, look to God for help, start to panic, let fear start to grip you, or something else. So again, when you're caught between a rock and a hard place, how do you usually react? Question why God let it happen to you, beat yourself up, look to blame someone, start doubting God, look for God for help, or look to God for help, start to panic, you let fear kind of grip you, or something else. For me, I look to God for help. I acknowledge that the answer will not always come immediately. It's not like I ask a question and then God's immediately going to open the heavens and speak to me. I realize that to everything there is a time and a place. So I can pray to God, but I'm not going to get that answer immediately, and I'm not always going to get it in a most direct means. It might take a week, 2 weeks, a month, a year. But in some way, some form, God will guide me through that kind of rough patch, and yeah, that's me. What about you all? When you're stuck between a rock and a hard place, what's your reaction? Let me know in the comments below. Question number 5. Comparing your spiritual journey to the Israelites' escape, where would you say you are right now? Living in bondage, chased by enemies, trapped and confused, doubting God, stepping out in faith, safely on the other side. For me, I'd like to say that I am safely on the other side. I don't really view myself as being in bondage, being chased by enemies, being trapped in any way. I don't find myself really doubting God. So I'd like to think that with my spiritual journey at this point in time, at least in regards to the obstacles I have faced, I'm safely on the other side of those obstacles. That's not to say that my obstacles are done. There are bound to be more obstacles down the line that at that point I may feel trapped and confused. I may doubt God. I may have to take a step out in faith to get to feel like I'm safely on the other side. But right now, having faced all the obstacles that have come my way, I'm safely on the other side of those ones. What about you all? Where are you all in your spiritual journey? Let me know in the comments below. Number 6, what led you to put your trust in God? A miracle? God's deliverance of me? A godly leader? I've not taken that step yet. Or something else? For me, well, it was a tragedy. I had a family member die unexpectedly at the age of 10, and I was kind of angry at God for allowing that to happen, thinking God caused that to happen as some sort of punishment to me, but not being able to really figure out what did I do that I deserve this punishment. So that kind of inspired me to pay attention in church, pay attention in Sunday school, to really look towards the bigger picture, see who is this God that my parents take me to worship every Sunday. And I think as I began to pay attention more, as I began to participate more, I was able to trust God more. Because I learned more about who He is, I learned more about what He's about, so on and so forth. So mine was a something else. What about you all? What has led you to put your trust in God? Let me know in the comments below. Question number 7, from what do you need God's deliverance right now? Problems at work, financial pressures, spiritual struggles, a bad habit, difficulties in a relationship, or something else? I can't really think of anything right now. Not really having any problems at work, knock on wood. Not really having spiritual struggles. There's not really any really bad habits. I mean, I chew my nails every now and then, but that's something I've always had. It's not really, I don't really have a bad habit past that. Honestly, I can't think of anything. I'm sure I'll think of something later, but all I can think of is my lower back pain. If God can deliver me from my lower back pain, just make it so I can crack my back and be able to stand up straight and get up and down from a chair, the floor, a bed, something like that, a little easier. I'd definitely take deliverance from that. But outside of that, I can't think of anything. Anyway, we're down to our last question, which of course is how can this group pray for you? As always, if you do have prayer requests, please feel free to leave them in the comment section below. Feel free to send me an email, give me a phone call. I would love to be able to pray with you all, pray for you all. Feel free to share your joys as well. It doesn't have to be concerns, things that need praying for. It can be things that we can celebrate together. But that's all I have for you all today. So tomorrow we will enter our last section, our last lesson in this, which is having a clean slate. So I look forward to going through that lesson with you all. But until tomorrow, stay well, stay safe, and God bless.